Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome everyone. It is Friday night and you are listening to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. I'm Anthony Agati in New York.
And I'm Lucy Leifried in Chicago. Are you ready for another Paranormal Friday night? We are so happy that you could join us. We welcome all of our regular listeners and those of you who've tuned in for the very first time. Now, if you have a question for our guest or about the topic tonight, feel free to ask us in the chat room or call into the show at 661-244-9831. We'll try to get to you as soon as we can. But don't forget, you can always send us an email with future topics that you'd like to see on the show, or if you just want to say hi. Our email address is paranormalreviewradio@yahoo.com. And last but not least, check us out on our Facebook show page and on our YouTube channel for more info on the paranormal and on upcoming shows.
Our show tonight is all about the underworld, the religious underworld of evil, dark, and the dead. Much of what we will discuss tonight either has been briefly skimmed over while in religion class in school or had been whispered and rumored about amongst many churchgoers who want to learn more but dare not bring it up to the priest. Why do we feel the need to sweep what we may not understand completely or may seem too dark and morbid under the rug and hope for the best? Why not bring it out in the open and have the religions explain what they're all about? Just because someone says it's taboo doesn't mean that it should stay that way or that it's okay for it to be taboo. Shine a light on it and bring it forward. So I have my big spotlight in my hand right now, and I'm going to focus it on many of these taboo, tight-lipped topics. The rapture, the role of Satan and demons, Antichrist, the Great Tribulation, and maybe get into the stigmata and the cult of St. Philomena and St. Michael. Originally from Detroit, Michigan, Noah Tysick works as the department chair of composition for one of the America's largest online universities. Noah Tysick has taught developmental English, composition, creative writing at several on-ground colleges and universities. He holds a BA in English and Fine Art from Saginaw Valley State University and an MA in Literary Theory from Central Michigan University. He's the author of Miss American Pie and Other Lies, Empty Day Collected Poems, Soothsayer, Visitations, my favorite, Exorcist Rising, a Magico-Religious Primer, and contributing author and co-editor of the KU Handbook for the Writers. Noah Tysick is an ordained interfaith minister who has particular affinity for Tibetan and Pure Land Buddhism. All right, that was my attempt at having a school bell. Okay, everyone, class is going to begin now. Professor Noah Tysick will be substituting for tonight's show. We're actually going to give him free range of the show tonight. This is the first ever in history. Please give a warm welcome to our good friend and maybe your new friend, Professor Noah Tysick. Hello, Professor. I like that name. Welcome to our online virtual classroom. We are all eager to learn tonight.
Thank you, Anthony, so much. It was a very flattering intro. And Lucy, as always, thank you for having me on as well.
Thank you. So how do I get on Teacher's good side?
Well, I do respond to flattery. That always works well. And,
welcome.
Thank you so much.
We're so happy to have you. You know that.
Well, I'm equally as excited. And for all my students that are listening out there, thank you so much. And for the ones listening to the recording, I understand because I know that you didn't want to hear my voice on Friday night at 10 o'clock. I totally get that. But thank you guys again for having me on.
So, Noah, we talked a while back, and, obviously you've been on the show several times now, and we always love your insight. I think you bring a breath of fresh air every time we have a topic, and we have the discussion after the guest or after the main topic, usually towards the end of the show. You've called in several times, and we've had you actually highlighted on the show a couple of times, I think. And you always bring a breath of fresh air to the topic. You always give a really good insight to things that, Lucy and I probably never thought of, and maybe some of our listeners never thought of, no matter what it is within the paranormal. It is, and I'm amazed at the angles that you tackle or that you bring up whenever we do have a discussion on the paranormal. Has the paranormal and the religious world sort of occupied your entire life, or is this something that you sort of got an interest in maybe later on, as in your teen years or earlier adulthood?
That is an excellent question. My formal education is in English and art, but religion, for lack of a better word, in all forms, has been an obsession since I was probably 5 years old. I've always asked the big questions. I've always wondered about my own faith that I was raised in. I saw some very good things. I saw some unusual things, and I've participated in things that some would perceive as taboo or phony. But for me, my journey continues through study and actual practice. I'm not a spectator when it comes to this type of stuff. I won't talk about it unless I've experienced it or at least watched other people and said, nope, that's not for me. So, but as far as, if one could make a living out of studying and practicing and discussing this type of thing, I would have found the way to do that. But as my students know, I always find a way to work it into the classroom somehow. Religion, the paranormal, the supernatural. It's what I live and breathe.
How do you go about doing that? I'm sorry, Lucy. How do you go about bringing that topic into your classroom?
It's actually quite easy for me in certain classes. For example, right now I'm teaching a Southern American Gothic Lit class, and with the Southern Gothics, the books that they write, they're what they call Christ-haunted, and they're so steeped in religion, Pentecostal religion. They're steeped in spiritualism, voodoo, and so that renders itself to a lot of discussion about these topics in order for students to even understand what the book's really trying to communicate. Recently, they read Merrick by Anne Rice, and she's obsessed with blood, obviously. And so that lent itself to a presentation about the use of blood and human sacrifice in the early Aztecs and how that translated over into Christianity when the Spanish took over the country. So there's always a good opportunity for that type of dialogue. And even in my classes, I don't like to be the sage on the stage where I do all the talking. What I do is it's an open floor, and that stuff somehow it comes up. Buddhism will come up, Hinduism, sometimes Christianity, sometimes voodoo, but it always gets in there somehow. It must be what I do. I don't know.
Well, it is what you do, because I've noticed in our conversations, a lot of times the things that you bring up are like things that in reading and media and movies and stuff, there's always some kind of tie to something else. It's like we've said before, this tiny web that connects everything. And, it's interesting that you mentioned, with the blood and the Aztecs. I've been so totally fascinated with Aztec culture and the religions and the gods that are there. But then again, what I learned from that always kind of like, I don't want to say, I can see both sides, you know, with the Catholic religion coming to Mexico, but then also here we have the Aztecs. And then when you talk about, you know, the Southern books, just the whole South, it's like everything is steeped in one way or another to something else, to some kind of religion touches everything in the South, whether it be voodoo, whether it be the Pentecostals, whether it be something. There's all of this connection. And talking to you, you have such a wonderful way of just tying it all together.
Well, thank you. My partner Ryan's mom, recently we were at an event, and I was sitting next to a Hindu girl from India, and so we started talking about Hinduism, and I was talking about Ganesha and Kali and different Hindu gods, the Bhagavad Gita. And she's, you know, she smiled and she said, "How do you know all this?" And Ryan's mom leaned forward and said, "He's a veritable treasure trove of knowledge," and we all just cackled. So I've assumed that title, veritable treasure trove, which is a tongue twister for me.
Do you find, Noah, do you find that going back to when you were mentioning about bringing religion into the classroom and into the topics that you discuss, do you find that people tend to either be combative to the idea of bringing stories up about religion or zone out when you start to bring that up into the classroom? Are your students or are you finding more and more of the younger generation interested in the topic?
That's an amazing question because, you know, I anticipate pushback with most of what I do. I don't follow the rules very well. I tend to do things my way while still getting fulfilling departmental requirements and doing my job right. What I found with the current up-and-coming students, they're very receptive. They like to discuss stuff, even people that are uncomfortable. For example, talking about voodoo, and you know, students they're very honest. They'll in their journals or in person they'll share with me if they were uncomfortable. But most of them there's curiosity because I tell them, you know, we're not here to challenge your beliefs, but I'm here to challenge your thinking. And I never talk about my specific belief system. I just simply present the facts and let them make up their own minds.
Do you think maybe it's because it's, I mean, I could be wrong, but do you think maybe it's because it's been sort of taboo to talk about that, you know, the younger generation now who are, you know, in high school and in college, they may not have heard as much of this as, you know, as we probably, most of us, heard about it growing up. You know, we went to religion class. We had family discussions on that, and we've heard it throughout conversations, either going through church or within family and holidays and stuff like that. Do you feel as though maybe because it may not be talked as much as these kids were growing up, that they find it now more interesting to learn about it? And also, too, on top of that, you don't give, you know, a straightforward syllabus on it. You know, you really bring, I think, the depth of the topic of religion. You go deeper than what normal people do. And so that may make it a little bit more interesting to them, and you capture them a little bit more. I don't know if you find that could be the relevance of why they're more interested in learning about that now.
You know, you make an excellent point. The people that are currently coming into the universities, their parents were raised much like us. I mean, whether we went to catechism or we were on a pew every week, we were saturated with it. But the people of our generation aren't typically that way. And I recently read a study by the Pew organization that basically stated that the fastest growing religion in the United States are the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, meaning people don't identify with a particular religion or sect or denomination. They choose to approach spirituality or the lack thereof in their own way. And they don't want to force it on their children. They want their kids to learn it for themselves. So without them having been brought up in a church, this, for a lot of students I found and younger people, it's, aside from, the basic tenets of Christianity, they pretty much are a blank slate, and they're very intrigued to hear the different anecdotes I'll tell and experiences, and I have to do it judiciously too, because I don't want to scare people. But they're very, they're for the most part extremely receptive, have a lot of questions, and they like the depth that it brings to the classroom.
Well, Noah, how do you pick your books that you have the students read? I mean, I know you said that there is, I'm sure there's criteria that you have to meet for each class, but are the books that you assign them to read, are they books that you've read, or that there's a particular point in the book that you want to make, or how do you choose?
That's also a great question. What I do is I consult the Ouija board, and it tells me which books to bring. I'm kidding. Oh no!
There would be there'd be about 100,000 people right now that would be testing that out.
Dear Ouija board and spirits, please tell me what to teach. No, what I do, books, what I do for a living, when you turn what is fun into a career, sometimes it can lose its excitement. And so when I cross a book that actually strikes me as something meaningful and memorable, I bookmark it. I mean, I have my own canon of books that I think are extremely useful. And because of my interest, they tend to be more of a spiritual or religious or occult or whatever. It has those components in there, undoubtedly. So it's I choose them. We're given quite a bit of latitude. In writing classes, not so much in the comp classes. But what we talk about in class and anything supplemental, it's entirely up to me. So as scary as it may seem, they give me free rein in the classroom, not knowing what they're doing. I'm kidding. But they do give me a lot of latitude to talk about what I want, but to do it, in a way that interests students, because I really follow their lead. If I sense they're uncomfortable, I'll back off, but it gets them thinking.
Well, you had recommended a book, and it was The Sound of Building Coffins, and I really loved it, but it was more because, of course, it took place in New Orleans. But I really did enjoy the whole I don't know the whole atmosphere of it. The tie-in to it really did make you think. So that's why I had asked, because I'm sure this is not the only great book that you found. And like you said, Merrick, Anne Rice's books, I mean, she covers the gamut from the taboo, talking about vampires to religion, And even there's a section of books, she actually stopped at one point writing the books about the supernatural and actually started writing about the life of Jesus. And those books were amazing. I mean, so that's why I was really interested. I mean, I'm a reader. I've always been a reader, and especially of things that have that kind of religious undertone.
Absolutely, and Anne Rice is an amazing person because she, like me, she's always searching. I mean, she was Catholic, atheist, pseudo-Catholic, Catholic. Now she's disassociated completely and does her own thing. And if you read her books, you can really see kind of her journey within the books themselves. And I'll just say this really fast. My students tire of me saying this. But the reason Anne Rice wrote Interview with the Vampire, it was a short story. It began as a short story. And what happened was her daughter Michelle had leukemia. And they watched, her and her husband, the late Stan Rice, poet and painter, watched their daughter Michelle die a terrible, bloody death at 5 years old. And that haunted them. They became alcoholics. He lost his job teaching at the University of San Francisco, and they moved back to New Orleans, and during their drunken stupors trying to reconnect, with reality in their lives, she dug out this old story, and she thought, you know what, I'm going to resurrect my daughter. And so for people that have read it or seen the movie, there's the little girl vampire, Claudia. And so Anne Rice, able to work through that very visceral experience with blood in a meaningful and literary way, in a very eloquent way, and to be able to bring her daughter back to life. However, for those that have read it and seen the movie, they know that Claudia doesn't last. But in Merrick, and that's why I brought it into the class, she's brought back. And to your point about the sound of building coffins, that is a masterpiece. It's the only book that man has ever written, and that's a staple. My students are going to read that this semester, and I've also planned to use it again for the winter as well, because it delves into so many things about the South and about voodoo and there's some magical realism in there that's, you don't quite know what to make of it. And so it requires a lot of discussion to really even understand what they're talking about.
Well, Noah, we've got as we have been discussing for a while now, and we confirmed earlier this week about the topics that you were going to talk about and bring up tonight. We've got a jam-packed show and really some interesting topics to discuss. But before we get into it, and by the way, Noah, this may be put you on the spot a little bit, but Lucy and I, to prepare for the show, we did some research, but normally what we normally do for each show is we have a list of questions that each of us would like to ask our guests. And tonight we have a blank sheet in front of us. We have no guide as to the questions that we're going to ask you. We figured that we'd let you sort of run the topics, and as you talked and as you discussed them, we were just going to formulate questions from that. I know this is the first time we've done it, so it may sound horrible and crappy at the end of the night, but I think it would make it a little bit more interesting because our questions are going to be more spontaneous. It's going to be more in the moment, and I think in order to make in order for the topics to be interesting, I think we need to get into that a little bit more and sort of be on the spot and living in the moment. And it may not be so structured for you, and please forgive us, but I think we're going to have a really good time tonight. We're going to have so much fun talking about these topics, and hopefully enlightening and educational as well, because this is one of the topics and one of the topics that we will discuss I don't know that much about. I don't know a lot of the history and the research and the background of it, and so this tonight's show is a little frightening to me because it's something that I'm not that well aware of. But before we get into all of the topics, I wanted to ask one question from you, and I may be putting you on the spot here, Noah, so again, forgive me. But
please do.
Out of the time that you've been here on this planet, and you have been breathing and alive and teaching and learning, is there one memorable religious experience that you have had in your life, either it be teaching and then you having an aha moment, or you going to you traveling and figuring out the meaning of something that you've always wanted to find the meaning of? Is there ever been a memorable, one specific top memorable experience that you've had?
That is the 1,000-pound question. There have been so many experiences that I've had, and that's what's compelled me to keep looking further. If for me to pinpoint one is difficult, but I would have to say that with all of my studies and all that, the experiential always overtakes the Gnostic, the intellectual. And I know that most of your listeners, they believe in the supernatural and the paranormal. Some know me. They know that I'm not a phony. But I will say probably the most life-changing event that ever happened to me in terms of that was when I was what they call being baptized in the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost. It was an extremely visceral experience, not even visceral, it was very otherworldly. I've never been transported outside of myself like that, and I've never been the same since that. And I can go into detail of the background of where that even comes from and what that means, because I know a lot of people, most exposure to that is through television and phony televangelists, and or maybe they've been to a Pentecostal church and saw it as weird. But when I was baptized in the Holy Spirit for the first time, nobody told me I had to do it. I wasn't looking for it. And it was probably the most palpable spiritual experience. I was at a very small church. My uncle was actually the pastor, and the congregation consisted of maybe 30 to 50 people. And as the sermon progressed, I was my normal teenage angsty self. I lost track of what they were talking about, and I'd never drank alcohol, but it was at that time. But it was sort of kind of like being drunk in a way. But I noticed as he spoke, the atmosphere actually started to electrify. It's almost like in the summer when you know a thunderstorm's coming. You feel it.
Mm-hmm.
But with that humidity and that buildup and that charge in the air, there wasn't a tightness in my chest. With humidity, usually I feel a bit tight in the chest and uncomfortable. It was actually very soothing. And what had happened was what was probably 45 minutes went by in 2 minutes. And they said, if anybody wants prayer, come up to the front. Well, once I stepped out of that pew and started to walk up front with no goading or by anybody, another 45 minutes had passed, and I barely remember what happened. I was speaking in tongues. I was dancing in the spirit, is what we call it, and I can elaborate on that too. It was an amazing experience, and the interesting part is I saw everything turned blue. I saw this color of blue that I've never seen before, never seen since. And that blue light, as soon as I saw it, I was transported. And it's really hard to explain these types of things, as you guys know. When you go into a place that's haunted and you investigate it, when you share the facts of what happened, when you share your evidence, it still doesn't quite touch what really happened and what you took in as a human being while you were there. You know it's true. You try to give evidence, but that evidence doesn't always convince people. But it's a very memorable experience for you because you were there and you experienced it.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the speaking in tongues and that. I think most people don't really understand what that really entails. I mean, we see it in film, we read about it, but what exactly is that? There's a lot of debate. People that are against that type of practice, they have a few different explanations. Some say that speaking in tongues was reserved for the early church, Christian church, that when the day of Pentecost happened, in the second chapter of Acts in the Bible, and the disciples and the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene were all filled with the Holy Spirit, it was used, according to the naysayers, as a tool for them to be able to share the gospel with people that did not speak their language. Other people, they look at it as it's just a bunch of overly ecstatic, emotional people that aren't of the highest, people that are a little bit touched. But really what happens when somebody speaks in tongues, and I'm going to have to use, when I talk about things that are biblical, I have to cite the Bible just for the naysayers. And I don't want to be a preacher here, but in 2 Corinthians, a lot of people have heard at weddings, it says, though I speak with the tongue of men and of angels and have not love, it profits me nothing. What actually happens is when somebody speaks in tongues, they are
filled with the Holy Spirit. And when we say filled, it's a form of, for lack of a better word, possession.
Mm-hmm.
You have full control of your capacities, but what you do is you open yourself up, and the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, speaks on your behalf. And it's a language of its own that sounds to some like babbling, but if we listen to other languages, it sounds like babbling. But what actually happens is the Holy Spirit, or I like to say Holy Ghost better because it sounds spooky, the Holy Ghost actually speaks through you and prays on your behalf when you can't pray. And the whole purpose of that is for you to have a line of communication with God that some call an angelic language, the way angels might speak. And what I found with that is that, you know, for me, I've experienced it. It's real, and even though I'm not active in the church, sometimes when I pray, it happens. I mean, it'll happen spontaneously in the car. I've been driving down the road with Ryan, and, you know, he puts in the right song, and all of a sudden he's like, uh-oh, here we go. It's just, and it seems very odd to people, and it's not meant to be a freak show, but what it is, it's a spiritual practice that's very deep and meaningful. And what I did in grad school, in one of my linguistics classes, I actually did a study on speaking in tongues. I recorded several sessions of people doing that. And in linguistics, you have to do what's called scansion. You go over the word parts. And the word parts, there's phonemes, morphemes, other different word parts. And you break those down and try to make meaning out of it. And in my very small-scale, short-lived study, I found something very interesting. People, when they're speaking in tongues, there is a method to it. Without them knowing it, even though we don't know what these different word parts mean, they actually come together to form what would fall into the category of a language. It has all the characteristics of a language. And so that gave me some scientific proof. And there's been other more influential researchers that have devoted their lives to either proving or disproving. But they found that, for example, and I wish I had his name, very prominent neurologist, he's been conducting a 20-year study, and he's been doing CAT scans and brain imaging of Buddhist monks, of Hindu holy men, and of Pentecostals and just other practices. And they have them either meditate, speak in tongues, whatever it is they do. And it was really interesting because what happens is neurologically, when people are in that state, it doesn't matter what religion you are, whatever your practice is, all of a sudden the part of your brain that recognizes time, space, and self-awareness totally shuts down. They're in a totally different realm. It's almost like your body's on autopilot. Your autonomic nervous system kicks in. You stay breathing, your heart beats, all your systems work, but the whole frontal lobe is just your imagination, your sense of mortality, all of that disappears once people are in that state. So there is some scientific backing to that as well, which I found interesting.
Well, I want to get into that topic a little bit later on because there is the correlation to, you know, what people conceive as exorcism or possession. And so, you know, you hear a lot of the stories about people talking in tongues while under oppression or possession, and I do want to get into that topic a little bit more. But I want to start off the show tonight, or the topics of discussion tonight, with the list that you had provided us about the topics that you'd like to talk about, which was, you know, the rapture, the Antichrist, the Great Tribulation. Why did you want to talk about that tonight? Why did you want to bring that up as a discussion point?
Well, you know, these are things that in the 70s, and I'm dating myself, there were almost an obsession within charismatic circles within the Pentecostal movement of which I grew up. And we spent as much of our life, there was a certain amount of liberation in being involved in a very supernatural church that believed in miracles and believed in various things, a very active religion. But with that came the baggage of what they called the rapture. They talked about the end of days, the Great Tribulation, which was almost, it was what I now know as a scare tactic, although some people sincerely believed it, but it was almost a way of keeping people in check. Nowhere in the Bible is the word rapture even used. The book of Revelation, or if you're Catholic, it's called the Apocalypse. The book of Revelation is, people want to take that to the bank as, this is an account of what's going to happen at the end of days, and here's how it's going to happen, and people have an exclusive. The reality is, when the Catholic Church came together and voted, yes, folks, they voted on what books would be included in the Bible. That was the most hotly debated book. That was included simply by a margin of just one vote. And that inclusion of that one book has changed the theology of a lot of denominations, where they don't know what to do with it. Some say it's symbolic, some just leave it alone. But the Pentecostal church tries to deconstruct it, and they try to break down, the mark of the beast. They try to break down how we'll know when the end of the world's coming. What they need to do is look at the historical evidence, and what scholars like Elaine Pagels, and she is very respectable if you're interested in any of this type of stuff. Anything by Elaine Pagels, Pagels. She is a PhD, and she is a professor at Harvard Divinity School. She did a very extensive study on the book of Revelation, and what she found was pretty stunning. For example, the book of Revelation, according to her theory, is not a prophecy. And this is a woman who's a devout Christian. What the book of Revelation actually was, it was a document created to communicate with the other, amongst early Christians, to communicate with each other in a way that was encoded without being killed by the Romans. They needed to be able to communicate what was going on in their lives. For example, it talks about specifically the beast, and his name and number is 666. And we all hear that, and whenever I buy something at the store and my total is 666, I add something on. I'm so superstitious about it, but what we found, what Elaine Pagels found, is this: in Hebrew scripture, for every letter in their alphabet, there's a corresponding number, and 666 was actually the number of Nero Caesar, who was ruling the Roman Empire at that time. And so what John, whether it be John that actually wrote the Apostle John, St. John, or somebody else, they were trying to communicate what was happening in different parts of the Roman Empire to warn other people. Then that was kind of like assimilated into what we know as the Bible, and people are putting new interpretations on it. But it was actually not meant for us. It was not meant for the end of days. It was meant for the people living in probably the 3rd century AD, 3rd and 4th century AD, and it helped them get through a very dark period in their history.
So it basically was just a warning for everybody who believed and read within the book of the Bible that secretly they should be doing so for their own fear of Caesar.
Yes, it was their only way that they could talk about the government without being caught. It reminds me of during the Holocaust when people would, at first, before it really escalated, they were allowed to write letters to relatives, and the Jewish people would very often write messages, very tiny, in the upper right of the envelope and then cover it with the postage stamp. And their relatives knew to steam or lick off the stamp because the true message was under the stamp, not in the letter itself.
So then why the seals? Why the 7 seals? Why go into such detail, of the 7 years and the scrolls of the seals and the Antichrist and all of that stuff? Why go into so much detail then?
I wish I knew the answer, because even with the research I've done, it's really hard to figure out entirely what the book is about. It's enigmatic in some ways. And the problem with Pentecostals and fundamentalist sects of Christianity is they want to take everything very literally. And what they don't realize is the Bible is made up of several kinds of books. Some are historical, some are metaphorical, some are poetry, and some are mystic writing. And to really determine what's what is difficult, because we don't always have the historical context for it. And because they've been bound together in one single volume, many people want to believe that the world was literally created in 7 days, that everything is literal. And if it's there in black and white, then that's the way it is. And that's the same way with Revelation or the Apocalypse. An apocalypse literally means, what is it? Something to the effect of lifting the veil.
Right.
So it means that they're telling something. But I'm always very intrigued with the imagery in there too, and I don't know what to make of it myself. But I have to approach it like I would any other text that isn't straightforward. I mean, it's imaginative, it's lyrical, and even Madonna in her concerts, sorry to bring her up, but in her concerts, she reads from the book of Revelation, and during some of the intermissions, and her dancers, they'll dance to it. And there's something poetic, dark, and ominous, but at the same time lyrical about it that really, I think is interesting. But when we get into the literalism, I think that's when we get into trouble. Because if we think of Revelation literally, there's only going to be 144,000 people that make it into heaven. The rest of us, we are hellbound, straight to hell. We do not pass go. And Lucy is pointing the way.
Look, we're referring to her as...
I'm teasing. I'm teasing Lucy.
We're referring to Lucy as Lucifer tonight.
Okay. All right.
You know what? Talking about this literalism, I'm ignoring you both right now. That's one thing that I've always thought about. I mean, there are some people, there are some religions that take everything that's within the Bible as literal. But in my understanding, in reading it, I mean, I'm one of these kids, I grew up reading, I would read the encyclopedia and the Bible for fun. And my reading of this, these are stories that have been put together. I mean, we've got different authors for different sections. So how do you answer to the people who take everything as literal? It's in the Bible, so that's how it is.
What I try to do is I try to point out inconsistencies. Not to say that the Bible's false, but to show them that these were written by people in different periods of time. You have people in the Bronze Age. You have people from different backgrounds. You have people that are poets. And the fact that there are so many Gospels that weren't included, they chose 4 out of somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe, at least 50. But 4 were chosen for inclusion because the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church, found those to be the best ones to suit their purpose. The reality is this. I don't know if people have heard of it before, but the Gospel of St. Thomas is probably, and I'm going back to Dr. Elaine Pagels because she's brilliant. The Gospel of St. Thomas is the only Gospel that is verifiably written around the time of when Christ would have lived, around the 2nd or 3rd century A.D., It's the only one that was in Aramaic. All the other ones were in Greek or Latin. It was found in Aramaic, which shows that it was written in the actual dialect of what would have been spoken in that region of the world at that point in history. And the reason it's been kind of thrown aside is because although there's several parallels, that it's simply a collection of 114 sayings, which is typical of how disciples wrote. For example, when you look at Buddhism, the Dhammapada is what they call it. And the Dhammapada, it's not this long narrative. It's not a story. It's just a collection of sayings. In Taoism, they just have a collection of sayings written by the teacher. And looking at the Gospel of St. Thomas, there are so many sayings that Thomas reports Jesus of having said that align with the four Gospels that are accepted, that there's no reason that we shouldn't adopt it. But at the same time, people are threatened by that because it goes outside of what is traditional. Namely, reincarnation is a very big topic that's addressed. The fact that people do not have any need to go to a church or have a mediator like a priest or a pastor to lead them to divinity is in there. And so they found it very, very threatening. And so I point out inconsistencies, among the books, and point out ones that were completely left out, including there's another book that has every right to be in the Bible as anything else, called the Proto-Evangelion or something of that effect, of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And what's happened is all the feminine heroes in the Bible, they were pretty much stripped out by the Catholic Church. But then when Martin Luther, during the Reformation, came in and said, you know what, I don't agree with these books, we're going to take some out. When he came, he further removed the women. But this book about the Virgin Mary, and I don't have the name in front of me, that I've read several times, talks about her childhood. It talks about her experience at the crucifixion, her experience of after the day of Pentecost, how she had a ministry, like the Apostle Paul and all the other apostles. She went out and she performed divine healings, but that was too far for them, so they left that out. And I'll say this finally. A big question to ask literalists is this. If you believe that the book of Genesis, which has been proven to be written by 5 different people, not just one person, 5 people, with the title of Moses. Moses is not a proper name. Moses is a title, like professor, written by Moses. We know that allegedly Adam and Steve were in the Garden of Eden. Oh, wait, no. That's wrong. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. And when they procreated, they had 2 children, Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, and God cast Cain out of the Garden of Eden. Now, if Adam and Eve were the first human beings ever created, and Cain was cast out of the Garden of Eden, and people can check this out in Exodus if they want, it says that when Cain left the garden, he went to the land of Nod and took unto himself a wife. My question for them is, who are these people that a land, I mean, that's civilization. Who are these people that he went and met, and where did this wife come from?
Right.
And so there's so many things like that. And Anthony, when you're asking why have I always thought this type of thing, I always ask those questions that would frustrate my Sunday school teachers and my youth pastors because they couldn't answer it. They had no good explanation.
Well, we're going to be called again, heathens and atheists and Catholic bashing. We did a show not too long ago, which I think you remember, Noah, about the origins of religion. And we just brought up the topic. It was just a discussion point. We were not trying to make anyone believers. We were not condemning any one religion. We actually talked about many different religions that night, which we probably will be discussing tonight as well. And it's just to bring up the topic for discussion, to have a real discussion. I'm not trying to, and nobody here is trying to fabricate anything. We're not trying to persuade anybody. We're laying out the facts. And so, Noah, this leads me to the question that I have. And in regards to the previous show that we did on the origins of religion, we sort of went back to Egyptian beliefs and other religions as well. And we saw parallels to the religions of today to that of prior to the start of the religions of today. Do you find, or have you found, any instances or evidence thereof in regards to the Book of Revelations within other religions today, or even prior to the start of Catholicism and Christianity?
That's a good question. That type of I don't want to say doomsday book, but that's always a question people have. And I think that what we try to do is we try to grapple for, what's our fate? We see different things happening. Like right now, our economy is crippled. There's so many things happening as far as our country goes. People want answers. And so different religions have tried to address those things. Mm-hmm. And some have done it in ways that they may not even have written them for that purpose, but they were used for that purpose. That's caused fear in people and dread rather than give them hope. And the first one that comes to mind, which is one of my all-time favorite books, is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It mm-hmm. doesn't talk about the end of days per se, but what it talks about is when you're approaching the end of your life, what you can expect to see, and different realms that you'll go through as you pass through to your next incarnation. Now, many Tibetan Buddhists do not believe that to be literal. They look at that as symbolic of our various stages of life. And I think that we all can learn a lot from the Tibetans in that way. For example, they say that we get lost in different realms of our life, and if we don't recognize it, we're stuck there. And there's one realm called the Hungry Ghost realm, where if you are, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, if you're in the Hungry Ghost realm, you are at a point in your life where you are engaging in excess, whether you're 20 or 40. I mean, you're drinking too much, you're having a lot of indiscriminate encounters with people, and basically you're stifling your own movement forward in life. And until you recognize that you're caught in that realm, you can't progress to the next level. And so that book it's not scary. It's more of a guideline for the living. The Dalai Lama himself even said that. He does not think of it as literal. And I'm thinking about in Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita, that is one of their primary texts, which is a very poetic, very beautifully written. If anyone's interested in that, it's very worth reading. I was turned on to that by George Harrison, actually. When he wrote My Sweet Lord, he alluded to it, and I read more about it. And basically, Bhagavad Gita is about the end of days. It mentions a very real location, and it's a battlefield to where Krishna is, who is a version of Jesus, an avatar, or Jesus is an avatar of him in Hinduism. But they're equivalent to Jesus on a chariot with a man named Arjuna. And they're seeing the battlefield, the last battle of humanity to the death. But what that book actually teaches the readers is about the nature of being, the nature of being able to manage life, being able to manage your thoughts about divinity, but not seeing it as an end. And in fact, there's probably the most striking quote in there, which I believe is on George Harrison's tombstone, is Krishna said to Arjuna, he said, all these people that you see out here, the kings, the warriors, the fighters, the common people, there was never a time that they didn't exist, and there's never a time that they won't, which basically enforces the fact that human beings in one form or another, they've always been and they always will be. And so it's more of a positive, uplifting message than like some Nostradamus prophecy or some of the other things that we read. So as far as, to answer your question, these types of books in other religions, I don't know of, in my knowledge, of any religion that has a book quite like Christianity as far as the end of days, other than Judaism, the book of Daniel. That's pretty ominous too. That tends to, it's full of symbolism and things that are very difficult to determine what they're saying exactly.
Well, it always confused me, the fact that, growing up Catholic, that the Book of Revelations existed. It was a prophecy. It was talking about the end of times and the coming of the second coming of Christ, and pretty much obliterating the ground that we live on, and only uplifting those who are true believers. And it confused me, the fact that, on one side of the Catholic mouth, they're talking about how everyone should love thy neighbor and be good unto others and all of that goodness, but yet you're saying to me that at the end of days, quote unquote, the end of my life or of lives all around the world, that you're going to come down and pretty much kill everyone who does not believe in you. How do you make that into sense? I've never understood that fact of the teachings of that.
I agree, Anthony, and that is something that's bothered me, because that's an age-old philosophical question going back to Aristotle. I mean, if God's all-loving, all-powerful, and all-knowing, why would He condemn His own creation and basically damn them to hell? Which
right.
leads me to believe that it's more of an invention of humanity, or if it's not an invention, very piss-poor interpretation used to control people. And what's happening with this is a lot of what used to be Pentecostal churches are now teaching what's called the gospel of inclusion, which basically means this, that yes, which I don't necessarily agree, but they believe that yes, there is a hell, but the good news is nobody's going there, because whether you believe in Jesus or not, He made that atonement on the cross, and you're still going to heaven. Which, I find comfort in that, but at the same time, I think that we have to use common sense, and that's where problems arise. When people get so involved in a belief system where they lose common sense, then you're prey to whatever's thrown your way. Coupled with that is the experiential, and I'd really like to focus on that, because you have to balance the three. You have to be somebody who can look at things intellectually. Intellectually, once you've established that, then you can look at it from your own perspective, from your own experience, what you know to be true. Because what you know to be true may not be true for someone else, but that's your truth. And for example, as a gay man, I basically told by my church I was demon-possessed, I wasn't welcome, I needed to turn away, or I would go to hell, and that terrified me at first. But then when I realized, hold on a minute, back it up. If being gay is a sin, why did God make me that way? And if the church is wrong about that, they're wrong about other stuff. And I think we all have those aha moments. And I think that what we learn to do is to be much more proactive in our own belief system, or lack thereof. I mean, there's nothing wrong with not believing either, of course. And I feel like I'm getting preachy, so I'm going to back off for a second. I feel like I'm giving a sermon.
Well, no, I think I think I know what you're trying to say, and I know the meaning behind it. That we should all think about what we're believing in, and try and make sense of it. I'm sure people in the 21st century now are thinking quite differently than when they were in the 17th and 16th century about their beliefs, because of the exposure and technology and inventions and everything that has spruced up within the planet up until recently, that it sort of has shaped and changed people's minds. People are calling this age right now as the enlightening and awakening, and it's in conjunction with the questioning of many things and trying to make sense of it for yourself and trying to find the real truth, if there is a real truth. But I think it's hard for a lot of folks who have a belief in a faith, a particular faith, whichever it is, to question it, because I think a lot of the faiths themselves have condemned that fact, because if you question your belief, you're going against the belief itself. And so therefore they not even dare try and do that, because they're committing a sin. They're committing something against their God. And many folks will not do that, and they won't do that. And also then condemn other people who will then question it, like, for instance, us, who will condemn us for the fact of us questioning it and feel the threat that we are condemning their God. I don't know if it will ever come to light that we will all awaken and sort of try and make sense of our religions and come together. I mean, even the question itself, how is the world full of different religions if there is only one God?
That's an amazing question, and it goes back to something you said earlier, with the parallels between Egyptian religions. I mean, there's been so many messiahs that were born of a virgin, that died and rose again on the third day. Many had 12 disciples. What I found this: truth is truth. As human beings, we need certain things, and throughout different points in history, for some reason, these same archetypes, these same stories have come up that helps us make sense of the world, and we kind of have to go with whatever light we're given. I mean, if somebody if they're Mormon, if they are Muslim, whatever they are, if that really gives them meaning to their life and they don't harm other people, then that's fine. But to jump back, for example, in the Hindu scriptures, and you may have covered this on that other show, there's the story of the Great Flood. Vishnu, he towed a boat with a man, his wife, and the three sons. I mean, there's all these parallels. And I think the problem is this, and if I were a politician, I would say, here's what's wrong with the world. Everybody has the need to be right. And that's why we have all these holy wars. And it's interesting. There is no God but Allah. In Judaism, God's name is jealous. And in Christianity, we know the Apostles' Creed, that there's only one God. And in Protestantism, Jesus is the way and the only way. But what they fail to look at is that a lot of religions, there's scripture or there's statements that are made that don't quite line up with their exclusivist belief. For example, Jesus says in the Gospels, "In my Father's house are many mansions," and many have taken that to mean there's a lot of ways to get to heaven, and it's not just through me. Mm-hmm. The Buddha himself, the historic Buddha, not just later Buddhist writers, but historic Buddha Shakyamuni, he said that there are 10,000 Dharma doors, meaning you don't have to give up anything and follow me. You'll find your way. And I'm sure there's stuff in other religions that are similar, but for some reason, when you look at a person's core beliefs, it's so ingrained within them that it causes oh my gosh, I don't know how deep I want to go. There's a theorist, and my students are going to roll their eyes, a theorist named Jack Mesereau, an educational theorist. And he said in order to develop as a human being, you have to actually experience sort of an existential crisis where your belief system is totally shattered. Once it's shattered, then you go through the process of reassembling what you know, what you've experienced, and you may accept what you've been taught, but it won't be because your mama told you or your pastor or your teacher. It's because you'll know for yourself. You become an autonomous thinker. And I think that in order for people to move forward, in order for the world to actually get along more, they need to have this sort of crisis where their belief system, they acknowledge an inconsistency and they go ahead and question it. Because if if something is really that true, it can withhold scrutiny. If you scrutinize something, if you scrutinize our beliefs, then you're a sinner. That falls within the category of a cult, and that's where things get problematic.
Well, one thing that really strikes me that, as we talk about this, I can't help but think about, the Native American beliefs, the beliefs of the Aztecs and the indigenous people who had their own religious systems, their own beliefs, but yet here we have Christians coming, telling them that everything you believe is wrong. You're all savages. The only way, to heaven is to lose everything that you believe and follow our way. And my question has always been, how is it that how could God say one way is the one way, and what these people have believed for centuries is completely wrong?
And that's disgusting. And my dad's perking up right now listening to this because we're not Native American, but he has a great respect for the way that he knows that they believe in the Great Spirit. Mm-hmm. And it makes me sad, Lucy, that so much, especially here in the U.S., so much blood has been shed, so much violence in the so-called name of religion. And what that shows me is that is completely manufactured, human-made, that isn't reality and truth. And the unfortunate part is so much of the Native American belief system and culture, it's been so squelched because it was an oral tradition more than it was something that was in writing, that so much has been lost. One of the schools where I teach is located, it's actually on a reservation, and we have a lot of Native American students that come, and a lot of them, they don't know a lot about their history or about their past. Some of them don't care. It's almost like what was attempted has succeeded in some ways, and it makes me very sad because if you read people like, what's his name, Black Elk, have you read any of him, Lucy, or no?
A little bit.
Black Elk is, his esoteric and his encounters with the divine are so beautiful. He's one of the few Native Americans that was allowed to or had the opportunity to put his experiences in writing. He had the gift of prophecy. He explained what happened when the Great Spirit would move on him, like I talked about baptism in the Holy Spirit. He said that when the Spirit was on and in him, he said, when I breathed, my breath was like lightning. And it was so eloquent, and to know that was squashed out is disappointing. And it's really foolish, I think, with the way that was handled, and the results are catastrophic. Like I said, it's lost. So much is lost.
Mm-hmm. One of the many things. I'm sorry, Noah. One of the many things that I've learned just being around Lucy, and obviously I'm not Native American, but a lot of the things that I've learned a lot of things over the course of the years that I've known Lucy about Native American history, and some of which has been the history and the research that I've done whenever I do go to any locations for a paranormal investigation. Lucy and I, as everybody knows, we do our our due diligence, and we go back to prior history, to even we try and dig up even in government records or anything of that nature to try and find previous landowners or the people who existed on the land prior to the build of that location, and a lot of which, we joke around about it a lot, but a lot of which has gone back to obviously Native Americans, because they were the first inhabitants of this land. And so in doing so, I've learned a lot about the culture and what their beliefs are. And I've noticed that many of the beliefs within Native Americans, and Lucy and Noah, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but many of the beliefs within the tribes give human qualities to nature. And the stories that I've either been of mostly oral that have been passed on have created the story where they would give the human qualities to the land, to the sea, to the air and the sky and all of that. And so when we did our previous show on the origins of religion, the one concept that we talked about a lot of was that the constellations, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, and the sun and their positions within the sky pretty much was the television of our, ancient ancestors. There was no iPads, there was no iPhones, there was no television in movie theaters. That was their entertainment. And so there were a lot of stories and a lot of articles that Lucy and I read that the correlation between the constellations and the sun and the positions during the time of the year, so on and so forth, correlated to a lot of Catholicism. And in specific, there was, when Jesus died, on the third day he rose again, that was in correlation to the position of the sun during that time of the year, and it actually dipped down and came back up after 3 days, the sun itself in the position in the sky in the universe. It was amazing to find that. And so I'm seeing the correlation between how groups of people in ancient history were giving human qualities to nature, to things that they saw around them every single day and that they studied and that they watched every minute of their life. And what I'm thinking is that the latter religions kept the idea of giving the human qualities to the nature, but went a step further and actually made them human to possibly form the religions that we know about today. And I think we touched on that on the last show that we did, and I think that's probably why we got a lot of backlash just for that idea. But am I wrong to think of that nature, of that idea and that concept, that maybe Catholicism, Christianity, and so on and so forth, that because of the human traits that were given to nature as what the Native Americans did, these religions went a little, one step or two steps further and actually created humans out of them, and therefore created the belief that we know of today?
Wow, that's an amazing insight. In my experience, and Lucy, you'll probably want to jump in too, because he's hitting on your area of expertise in your passion. In my experience, in the history of religion, human beings, they can only approximate the supernatural. You can't truly categorize it. So everything that we see is an interpretation. And one of the Hindu mystics describes it as sending 10 people out into the rainforest and looking at a chameleon, and how different people are going to share that in a different way. It's the same chameleon, same experience, different way. But what we do is we try to approximate it. We want to give it a persona. We want it to have intelligence. And so if you think in Hinduism, they wanted to perceive God as powerful and strong and also protector and intelligent. So one of their gods that emerged, the oldest ones, Ganesha or Ganesh. And if you think of what India's like, what's the largest and but yet most gentle but can be fierce animal there? It's the elephant. So they had to put a face on it. And once we start to anthropomorphize divinity, it gives people a point of contact, but it can also be a point of derision. Whereas the Native Americans, in my understanding, they didn't need that. They simply understood the Great Spirit that flew, that basically inhabited everything, and they were content with that without having to put an external type of identity onto it. Am I right, Lucy?
Well, the identities that exist in Native American beliefs, yes, everything does have an identity. I mean, the earth, it is our mother. I mean, it is the land itself. It has an identity. The wind has an identity. The sun, everything has an identity, but it's an accepted part of what we believe. And the other part about it is that the supernatural things that happen within life, within our world, for some reason, Native Americans, we accept that. It's part of what the Great Spirit gives us. It's not something to fear. It's not something to... It's hard to explain because the belief is just so... You just know it. You feel it in your body. You feel it in your soul. You feel it in your being. Everything does come from the Great Spirit. But aside from that, everything... Okay, corn. Corn was probably the mainstay of a lot of the tribes in the West. Corn, maize. So they developed a personality for it. It has a being, whether you want to call it a spirit, whether or not... it's shown respect. It's not so much as it's worshipped. It's respect. It's respect for the food that feeds you, that feeds your family. Same thing with animals. I mean, the buffalo. I mean, you know, when the settlers came here, they literally started shooting buffalo for sport, whereas the Native Americans, every single part of a buffalo, if it was killed, was used. And before a hunter killed that animal, he would show respect. He would apologize. He would thank the animal for giving up its life, for giving its body to feed a family or to provide shelter or to provide clothing. So Native American belief doesn't really have the rules and the regulations. I mean, there are guidelines that you follow, but everything really does have an identity. I mean, we truly believe that everything has, what I want to say, like a personality, a consciousness, a being, an intelligence. But see, on the other hand, now that we're talking about, you know, giving these things identities. Correct me if I'm wrong, Noah, but what was it? I believe it was Constantine, when they were first bringing in the Catholic religion or the Christian religion. Did he not take a lot of the beliefs from the pagan gods and kind of like just, well, we're going to change this. We're going to call this, and we're going to call this. And it was more as a form in order to control the masses and to have them believe, you know, how do I get someone to follow me and to follow my rules? Well, I'm going to take my rules and I'm going to kind of change them to what they understand. So they'll say, oh, wow, yeah, you know, that's right. Isn't that kind of like how that side of it goes?
That's exactly what happened. Constantine, he had a conversion, and not because somebody preached to him. He actually had a vision of Saint Michael, and Saint Michael basically told him how to win whatever war. And I'm sorry, I'm not a big history buff, but he was in battle and told him how to succeed. And he promised that, you know, if he succeeded, that he would convert the Holy Roman Empire to Christianity. And so to make it palatable for them, because, and again, that was a personal experience that he imposed on other people, all the temples that were devoted to Venus all of a sudden became temples to the Virgin Mary. Temples devoted to other demigods like, say, Hermes, the messenger. Those were devoted to Gabriel the archangel because he was also a messenger. They made a very, it was syncretic. They took what was understood and just put a different form onto it. And again, when you put that form and that personality and actually make an image of it, it's almost in some ways it's manipulative, and it can really it shakes people's belief. People they get upset by it. For example, Hinduism. If the Brits had succeeded in overtaking India, little children in India at night, they pray to Hanuman, the monkey god. Here in the U.S., we think of Planet of the Apes. Monkeys, they're either cute, but when they're human-like, they're scary. But they pray to him at night just like Christians pray to St. Michael the Archangel or their guardian angel, because a monkey is seen as, smart, it's limber, it's gentle, but they can be protective. What would have happened if they had succeeded in taking over India is those kids would have been given an image of a winged man rather than a monkey, which seems taboo to us and seems creepy, but it makes complete sense to them. And who are we to judge that?
Well, Noah, we've got some callers. Do you mind taking some questions from our listeners?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. We have area code 587. Hello, you are on the air. Who am I speaking to?
Matthew.
Hi, Matthew. You have a question for
Hi,
Noah?
Matthew.
Well, actually, I actually wanted to chime into the conversation that you guys were having about the archangels and the various types of consciousness that's of the same Great Spirit, like in the native tradition. What I've been experiencing in my recent past is, as I've been experimenting with projecting my awareness into different states or different realms of dimensions, I came across an angel, Michael, and he was telling me various different things. And one of the things was we are like both the demons and the angels are different representations and separate individuals of different personalities of the same God or the divine consciousness, right? Hello?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are you asking me if I find that's the case?
Oh yeah, but I'm open for different interpretations of opinions, but yeah.
Okay, and again, your name's Matt?
Yeah.
All right, great, Matt. That's a very interesting question, and it's actually very controversial. Not to get too far back into the history, but some argue that Christianity is actually a sect of Judaism, and according to ancient Jewish mysticism, God, what we call God, is actually the entire cosmos. It's all contained into one, and and God is composed of several parts, and within those parts are every aspect of divinity and humanity. One of those segments, one of the 12 segments, is called Din, D like David, I-N. Within Din exists what we call demons or evil spirits. But the reality is they emanate from that same divine source. So it's just that same divine source in a different form. How we deal with that is really dependent on each religion. But according to the ancient Jewish mystics, it's still God. And if you look at Hinduism, it's the same way. there's different incarnations of the god or the goddess. For example, in Hinduism, you might have somebody like Lakshmi. She's very gentle. She enjoys poetry and music. But from that very same god comes another incarnation, which is Kali. She's the fierce mother. She's the protector, the slayer of demons. She wears a necklace of human heads. She has a belt made out of human arms, but it's still from the same source. So if that's what your personal experience told you, that's consistent with what I've known and studied from other religions. And I'm sure a lot of people will disagree completely because they believe either it's good or it's evil. But I think that it shows maturity, spiritual maturity, and true in an authentic experience that you would come to that conclusion that there's a chance that it's still emanating from the same source, just by a different form.
Oh, I definitely agree with that.
Lucy or Anthony, I don't know if you guys want to.
Yeah, well, I had a question, and you have every right not to answer this, Matthew. But I was just curious as to, do you have a particular belief, a religious belief? No. Okay. Is this you mentioned? No, and that's perfectly fine. The topic that you brought up was that you sort of do. I'm assuming you do astral projecting or stuff of that nature.
I really don't know what it is. I don't really know how to label it, but it's actually a very interesting experience where it's pretty much in the realm of the mind, but at the same time it's of reality. It seems so real to the point where it's overwhelming. Like that kind of overwhelming. Like to the point where you start freaking out, right? Wondering what the heck's going on.
do you find? I'm sorry, Lucy. Just one more question. Sorry, okay. Lucy. Do you find that while going into this, whatever it is, if this is a trance or an out of body experience of some sort, do you find that you're experiencing or trying to gather information about, say, the meaning of life, the meaning of you, the meaning of things around you? Is that what is happening during this state?
Mainly the question that pops into my head is, what the heck am I? Because what I've been experiencing in the other realms was, it just wasn't normal by human standards. Like I've experienced demonic activities in a very subtle manner. Like, and by my experiences and definition, demons are just beings of ignorance and arrogance and are left in the dark and are self-destructive by their own fear, but they don't even feel their own fear. They only feel anger.
Well, okay. That's what I wanted to ask you, Matthew. What led you to start questioning and to start searching for these kind of answers? Is there like a particular instance is there an experience that you had that led you to start with these questions and to start on your search?
It actually started spontaneously, seemingly right out of nowhere when I started working at a warehouse. It's like I wasn't aware of anything about that. Like I went over to lakes to camp out, and I'd tune into nature and see if I could get anything out of it, but pretty much all I get was like a heightened sense of energy within my body. That's about it. But as soon as I reached the age of maturity, that's when all this stuff started happening, especially when I moved up here into the city where everything happens.
Well, Matthew, thank you for calling in, and I hope Noah's answer gave you a little bit more of an insight into, what you were feeling and what you were envisioning.
Oh yeah, definitely. I got a lot from your radio talk show here. It's quite interesting, for sure.
Well, great.
Well,
Thank you for calling in, and I hope to catch you next week, next Friday. Thanks a lot, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, too. Have a good one, eh? Bye.
You too.
Good night.
All right, no, we have one more caller on the line. We have area code 989. Hello, you are on the air. Who's this?
This is Shane.
Hi, Shane.
Hi,
you have
Shane.
a question? You have a question for Noah?
Yes, I do. I'm actually one of his students.
Great.
And it's not really a question, more of a statement. I've been listening to this all night long, and me and Noah have talked a lot, and I'm actually a part of a youth ministry at my church, and he kind of knows my beliefs, and listening to all this stuff, it's actually opened my eyes to a lot of things. I'm starting to believe more that the church I'm in is more of a cult-like, a dictatorship, and it's really changed my views on a lot of things. Noah is an extremely intelligent person. Not saying this for extra points either, Noah.
Extra credit. Here we go, check.
Yep, extra credit. Here we go. No, but really, I want to know more about this stuff, and me and Noah will talk more, but it was more just a statement about this stuff. I'm starting to question my own religion a lot, and I'm sure I'll probably going to hear a lot of it from a lot of people. But that's just
Shane,
the way
Shane, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Shane, I have a question. Were you always questionable about your faith growing up until this point now, and sort of Noah's talks and speeches and guidance has allowed you to open up your eyes a little bit more, or was it that you were a strong faith believer in the religion that you own, and that meeting Noah or doing any research on your own has sort of made you question things and start to question things, and now are starting to fight that battle within yourself to try and find out what's right and what's wrong?
No, I've never really been strong in the religion. I grew up in a Baptist family, which I grew out of fairly quickly, and I've actually only been back into the church, I would say, for a little bit over a year, where I've started seeing things and believing more. But the longer I've been into this church that I'm at, I've been starting to see more negative than positive reactions. And, I'm just not starting to believe a lot of the things that they believe. I'm kind of I believe in everybody being good with everybody, but I don't believe in a lot of the rules. They have a lot of rules at this church. I know of, Noah's partner and stuff, and I don't agree with what the church believes on that. I believe everybody is to their own and has their own rights to love who they want to love, and stuff like that. And so that's just one point. You're not allowed to do this or that. Just more rules than showing love and respect for everybody, and those kind of things.
And Noah, you're not trying to convert anyone, right?
No, he's never
absolutely not. Shane
No.
he's an unusual student because he and I we have a lot in common. We're around the same age. He's very intelligent. He's a seeker, which I really appreciate. And Shane, thank you for calling in. It's great to hear you on the radio here.
No problem.
But we've even had lunch and stuff, and he and I share a lot of the same questions about religion and reality, and I think it's good that he's seeking it, because I hate when people say, well, they're losing the faith, and it goes back to what you said, Anthony, about questioning things. And if you're in a situation where you can't question it, it should be able to withstand scrutiny. And I think that what's going to happen with you, Shane, is you're going to emerge from this much more evolved, much more close with whatever it is that you perceive as as God and divinity without all these rules. I think as soon as you put rules on something, that does two things. One, it's oppressive, which is contradictory to what even Jesus said. At the same time, when you put rules on things and you make something taboo, it makes it more tantalizing for people. If you say, don't do this, you're going to do it. For example, if you're in the living room with someone, say, I took off my pants, don't look. What's the first thing that they do? They look.
Right.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's great that that you're questioning, because you're moving toward a deeper experience, and I really respect that, and your bravery to even say that, because a lot of people won't even come out and say that, is wonderful.
It is what it is, and one of the big things that you guys talked about, or a question that you guys asked tonight, which really hit home, was talking about, God, if he loves everybody so much and unconditionally, when he comes, why is he going to, wipe out so many people and kill that? And that, just started hitting home with me. You're exactly right. I mean, it says God loves everybody, no matter what. Well, why are there so many? Well, if you do this, you're going to go to hell. I just don't, I got some big questions going on right now, and, I just think this is a very eye-opening thing, and I'm actually very glad that I listened to this tonight. I was going to wait probably until the recording, but I'm glad I hit it tonight, because it really opened up my eyes a lot of things and give me some more questions.
Can I say this, Shane? I think that it's good that you're asking questions, and if you're worried about going to hell, I'll be right there with you, because definitely an apostate and a heretic, because I ask the questions, and I think that's like I said, very brave, and I do appreciate you calling in tonight.
Oh, no
problem. It means
a lot. Oh, I don't think we'll be going to hell.
I do have a question, and one of the things that you just said, Shane, about, basically, I think a lot of us do believe that God is love, okay? And one of the things, and not to bring up the Native Americans again, but my whole thing is that, okay, if God is love, that's the most important thing. But how can people who have been living in an area of the world that's so totally untouched, who may have not come in contact with the Christian beliefs, and they've been living their lives in almost like a pure manner without any influence from anybody else, how can that be wrong? How can what God has allowed to happen and evolve on its own be wrong?
Oh, I totally agree with you on that. It can't be, and what my pastor would say is, well, they just don't know God, and I don't really believe that, and I'm actually part Native American too, and maybe this is why I'm having such a big, reflection on me, because I believe in the earth and the animals and everything like that.
Shane lives deeply in the woods.
Very good.
Shane, I'm going to tell you, Lucy, she's got the Kavorka. She's got this draw. For people that watch Seinfeld, the Kavorka, the lure of the animal. That's probably what you're feeling.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but this is a very good thing and a very, very educational program. I'm actually very glad that you guys put this on tonight.
Well, what it sounds like, Shane, is that you've got that connection by living in the woods, by being in the woods. You're feeling that energy. You're feeling what's there naturally without having the influences of other things. Life is a lot different when you're in the middle of what God has created without having all of these rules and all of this, you have to do that. When you actually just step into the forest, when you step onto the earth and you make that connection, that's when a lot of the things come into your heart. And that's what the Native Americans believe.
Oh, I agree with it. I mean, it's an amazing thing to be where I'm at. I mean, I see deer, I see bear, I see turkeys. I mean, every kind of animal you can think of. It's in my front yard or in my backyard. I mean, it's an amazing thing, and it is. I mean, when you step out on a nice sunny day or hear the wind blow through the trees, I mean, it's just a calming, relaxing feeling. And I mean, you feel peaceful, and you know, it is what it is. I mean,
you're feeling love, and that's what it is.
Oh yeah. But I've taken up enough time, I believe, and I'm going to finish up listening to this story. Very glad that it's been done once again, and Noah is an extremely researched person. I mean, I know he does his work, and I'm proud to be one of his students. I'm blessed to be one of his students. I learn a lot, and I hope anybody that's listening really, doesn't fight him too much, because, like he says, he doesn't say anything without doing the research first.
That is 50 extra credit points right there. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
He was fishing for. He was fishing for that A. I know it.
No, I work hard for my A. I work hard for my grades.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Shay, for calling in. We do appreciate it, and we all hope that you find the path that you were destined for, and that you continue your life in the peace that you wish for. So thank you for calling in.
Oh, no problem.
Thank
Have a good evening. Yep.
See you, Shane.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Well, Noah, I don't know if you realize this. We've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes.
And I just looked at that. I was, holy cow.
There were
we barely scratched the surface.
I know. There's so many other topics and areas that I want to get into, and I'm sure Lucy does.
I have 5 pages of notes. I'm sorry, 5 pages, and I haven't talked about a single thing on those pages. That's hilarious.
well, in the remaining few minutes, because after the show, after we have our guest on, then Lucy and I do a few other things. But was there one thing that you wanted to make sure that came across on tonight's show that you wanted to express? If it was something that you've written down on those 5 pages that maybe you wanted to express, I'll give you the floor for the next few minutes.
Thank you. A couple things. One, I think that. Again, I am not a religion basher. I don't share I have many beliefs, and I really think that people, they have to find their own way, and I'm not bashing anyone, so please don't see me as challenging that. The other thing that goes very underrepresented is atheism, people that do not have a belief system, or the agnostics. For those people, in my experience, they're responding to Christianity, because here in the West, they reject the notion of God because of what they've been taught God is. In reality, I think that they would benefit from reading the Tao Te Ching, Taoism, T-A-O, read about the Tao, because I think that we all, as intelligent human beings and spiritual beings, do have a certain, we do hold to some truths, and I think that Taoism has a lot of answers for people that think that they may not believe in a God at all, because Taoism is beyond deism, beyond the belief in a God, and it has a lot of truths, like Shane was talking about, with nature, and by observing nature, you're observing the eternal. And that's all I wanted to add.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Noah, is there, usually with our guests at the end of the interview, we always say, you have any upcoming events, or are you doing anything? Are you planning on writing any more books?
I have been. Thank you for asking. I've been working on one for several months now, but I keep changing my mind. I do not have any projects, and my website is currently down. But you can Google me to find out what I'm up to. And when I say Google, I know that sounds dirty. I don't mean it to sound that way. But Google me, and you'll always know what's going on. I'm a very nice person, very open to dialogue. So don't hesitate to hit me up on Facebook or whatever. I'm always happy to talk to people.
Well, you know, before the show, I actually did Google you, and believe it or not, you are pretty famous on Google. There's a bunch of pictures, and there's a bunch of websites that have your name on it. You know, I was trying to formulate, your bio, and there's a lot of stuff on you. You get around there.
Well, I've been told that in more circles than one. As always, thank you guys so much. It's been my sincere honor being on. You're very gracious, very professional, and it's always a pleasure to be part of your program. I appreciate it. Oh, one more thing. And if Bob Murch is listening, thank you so much. And if you're not, I'm going to text you and be angry.
You better stalk him.
I need stalkers, too.
No, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. It really is. I mean, tonight was a perfect example. Time flew. I mean, it went by so fast.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Like I always say, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You give a breath of fresh air to every topic that Lucy and I discuss and talk about. It's not always the discussions within chat or a few on air, but, we have conversations, and Lucy has conversations with you off air and on Facebook. It's just it's always enlightening to talk to someone who is of the same level and I think even higher than myself. I can't speak for Lucy, but I'll speak for myself. Higher than myself in the knowledge that you contain and that you give off and that you exude to everyone that you encounter and meet. And so it's a privilege for us to have you on the show tonight, and hope it's a privilege to everyone who's listening to hear your words, to learn from you, and hopefully go on and research and find your own path, just as Shane was and just as Matthew was. Find your own path and don't be afraid to question. I think that's the MO for tonight. Don't be afraid to question anything that you feel should be questioned. So thank you, Noah, for coming on and teaching us everything that we've learned.
Thank you, Lucy and Anthony.
You, Noah.
You guys are great. Have a glorious night.
You too. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 I wasn't demeaning towards you. I can only speak for myself. I think he's higher than me. You may think he's on the same level as you. I don't know. And you're higher than me then, I guess, right?
I didn't say anything. No, I mean, honestly, I love talking to him because he is one of the people that makes me think. There are a few people in my life that always, I love talking to them. And because of it, they make me think, and that's the most important thing. It's one thing when you talk to somebody and they're just talking at you. It's not like that with Noah. Noah actually engages you. He makes you think. You're one of those people. Noah's one of those people. I mean, I am very, very blessed to have such people in my life. And what I like most about him is that he doesn't bash anything. He doesn't preach, even though he said he felt like he was. He doesn't preach. He's simply giving you the ammunition to think on your own and to question. And I think that is a gift.
Yeah, he's very professional in that manner. There are many people who, when discussing a topic, are, on the opposite end of what you're thinking or what you're questioning, that they become very defensive, and then it starts to get a little ugly. Noah's not like that. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you have to be once you know the real truth. If you understand the topic and you have the backup and you have the evidence, or you can cite references to the cause of your debate, then you don't have to make it get ugly. And Noah doesn't allow it to get that way. He's very intellectual in that manner, and that he can, and he will then back down if he knows that maybe he may not have all of the answers, which is similar to what you and I do a lot of times. That's what makes a great speaker. That's what makes a great teacher. He is able to profess what he knows and teach it to people, but he's also at the same time open for the communication for research back from the people that he's actually teaching. That's what makes a good teacher. That's what makes a good professor. And you can see it. It's evident in one of his students that called in tonight, Shane, how much he's helping him. And people are probably going to turn around and say, "Oh, look, he's converting him from his own religion. He's evil. Noah is evil." Well, people are going to have those opinions. They're going to feel that way. To each their own. But in my opinion, I don't think he is. I think he is guiding folks who already have it implanted in them, the question, or have the doubt already within them. Because you can't, I've seen many fanatics out there within the religious world and other worlds that you can't change them if they're a fanatic. You will not be able to. And so for folks to be able to, quote unquote, convert from their faith, that they've already have had that question or that doubt within them and within what they're believing. So I don't think it was a matter of Noah making anybody change. It's allowing them, the research is sort of flowing through Noah and out to the person. That's what's happening. Whether this person would have gotten it from somebody else or not, it doesn't matter. I guarantee you, the Shanes of the world would be questioning their faith, and it's not a matter of whether or not Noah is doing it. So I don't want people to get that wrong impression of him from this interview tonight. And I don't want people to bash him or you guys can bash us, but we don't feel that it is necessary to be doing that to him because he's not exuding that in any manner, in any way, I don't believe.
Well, honestly, I think that's where a lot of the disillusionment comes from with the existing religions that we have now, is that lack of the ability to question and to ask. I mean, I think that's where a lot of, not just young people, I think people in general, I mean, to take everything that's given to you, but yet you're not allowed to question, you're not allowed to ask, where is this coming from? What's the basis behind it? I think if the current religion leaders, regardless of what religion you're in, if they allow their followers, their faithful, to ask the questions, to get an answer, I really don't think that a lot of people would leave whatever religion they believe in, because it boils down to the fact that we're human. We're going to question. We're going to ask. What does a child do as they're growing up? Why is this? Why does this happen? What is this? And we never lose that. We keep that throughout our whole life. So I really respect someone who will allow you to question, who will, in essence, learn along with you in the process of guiding you to an answer. They don't just sit there and say, no, this is it and this is the way it is, but to actually listen to the question, to guide you along, and maybe in the process find their own answers too. I think that's a lot of what Noah does.
We can talk certainly for hours, if not days, on this topic because it really does interest me. I have those questions. I've had those questions myself. And so, this topic tonight really does interest me. And what Noah talks about, because I wasn't even sure the direction that he was going to go into tonight. That's why we didn't have, a set of questions for him. We wanted to let him run the show himself, and we would end up where we did. And I'm really happy and pleased with the way that the show turned out. And so I think maybe we should have him on again and talk about this topic, maybe further the discussion and talk about the other topics that we actually did want to get into, because one of my favorites was stigmata, and I wanted to get his thoughts and what his knowledge was about that. But we've got a few minutes left, and so, and by the way, everybody doesn't see this, but the show board, the board that we have with all the callers and the chat room and all of the audio clips that we normally play and stuff during the show, just so everybody knows this, because I've been holding in this laughter the entire show, but Lucy named, we have the call-in, and so the call-in number, so when I call in to start the show, when Lucy calls in to then co-host with me, and then we have the callers that call in, Obviously, the callers that call in, their names don't pop up. It's just their phone numbers. But we plug in the names of ours underneath our phone numbers so that we know which one is who. And I didn't do this. I did not do this. Lucy did this. Lucy named herself Lucifer. So I just wanted to go on record and say she is the devil, and I have told you all that from the very beginning. She has named herself Lucifer, and that is that. Okay.
Well, I've been accused of being the devil all day today, so I just figured I was going to go along with it. And it's not the first time I've been called Lucifer.
I'm sure it hasn't. Okay, Lucifer, get on with the show.
Okay, so let's go to our regular Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week. And this week, it is Cheryl Molencup of Clarkston, Michigan. Cheryl likes Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins. She likes working out. She likes traveling. She likes cooking, meditation, camping, and, of course, she likes Paranormal Review Radio. Thank you, Cheryl, for being a fan. Thank you for posting on our page, and congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations, Cheryl. And don't forget, if you want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, don't worry, you don't have to like Lucifer. Just like us on Facebook, Paranormal Review Radio.
I'm going to get a complex. You know that.
I know. Bigger than you already have.
Okay. Well, you know what? There are so many mysterious things that we see and we hear, and they all have some kind of religious connection. While not everyone shares the same faith, we all have the same questions when it comes to connecting with a higher power. What seems to be unusual or frightening can actually be a source of healing and guidance to someone else. It may actually be a very strong part of their faith. But as long as we can ask questions and learn about what we don't understand, we can work to banish the false impressions of what others believe. Tonight we had a wonderful teacher, and we did learn a lot. We want to thank you, Professor Noah Tysick, for opening up our eyes a little bit more. By learning about what we don't understand, we can all become more tolerant of our brothers and sisters all over the world. Because, after all, we're all members of the same family, are we not? So, besides all the mysterious things in the world, there are some odd things, some very odd things. They baffle us, they mesmerize us, and sometimes they just plain confuse us. So, where can we go for answers? Where can we find someone who is searching for the truth and is willing to share what they find with us every single week? Who? Well, there is the host of 30-Odd Minutes, writer and researcher for Ghost Adventures, prolific author, and very funny guy, Jeff Belanger. That's who. Jeff will be joining us next Friday night to share some of those odd and fascinating things and to give us an update on what's going on in his crazy world. So do not miss this very special evening with Jeff Belanger. We want to thank you, everyone, all of our listeners, our friends, and family. You guys make Friday night the best night of the week. Thank you, Anthony, for making every show we do a mystical experience. So, until next week, Parapeeps, happy Dia de los Muertes, and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio.